Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
This episode is sponsored by Founder Catalyst. Get 10% off their one-off fee by using the link in the description. More on them later. For now, enjoy the show. So you're back for part 2.
Right.
We were talking a lot in part 1 about obviously the investment landscape, your experience there, and your book that talks a lot about the sort of tips and tricks for thinking like an angel investor. But I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask more broadly around the startup ecosystem. Your area of expertise is primarily in the tech space. What would you say are some of the things that aren't being talked about in this space that you think really deserve a bit more attention?
Sorry, that are or aren't
talked about?
Oh, okay. I had a bit of a conversation with someone the other day, which was touched on this. His view is that there are a lot of kind of tech ideas which have attracted investment in the last few years, like SaaS, for example, which may or may not have come to the end of the road. And then there is AI, obviously, but there need investing in which, like a lot of deep tech, which I don't profess to understand, some of the kind of deep tech areas in great detail. But what I do understand is that, if we're going to solve some of the world's real, deep ingrained problems, like climate change, for example, there are some deep tech ideas like generating hydrogen, for example, and applying it in various sectors that don't fit very well with a kind of relatively short VC investment term. If somebody wants to put their money in, at Series A and try to get out in 5, 6, 7 years or so, then a lot of these, deep tech ideas need investment over longer time frames to actually prove. And some of those are coming from university spin-outs, early stage, got big risk written all over them. And that makes it quite difficult.
So what's your stance on that? How do we solve that?
I think there has to be some hybrid approaches to it. I mean, I think it's quite difficult to expect angels alone to invest the quite significant amounts of money sometimes required in developing some of these ideas. And the VC model doesn't necessarily lend itself to some of these ideas, at least until they get to a certain stage. People are very reliant on grants, for example, government grants to give them a leg up, from Innovate UK and other grant sources. But even then, and some of them have, say, infrastructure development. So, you might expect more private equity to step in at an earlier stage. So it's a challenge, certainly, and in part comes back to the investor and their team being able to, as best they can, prove the benefits of investment in a big idea.
And I suppose the issue for angels there as well is dilution, which will make, for those far bigger concepts, it almost unfeasible to some degrees in sort of big tech, especially if they go on to raise these extraordinary rounds later on. So I totally see that as a problem that I've not really heard much about. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think there you hear horror stories of the founders themselves and angels being victims of, quite severe liquidation preferences. The VCs get all the money and the founders and the original angels get left with next to nothing. So, and it's I can see it's very difficult for founders to, who often spend such a lot of time trying to court, VCs to invest money in them. And finally, a VC comes along and says, well, we will invest money, but we want these, kind of extreme rights, to invest in you. Founders are either naive, uninformed, desperate, impatient, whatever. They go with something and then 3-4 years down the line, they exit and they end up being disappointed.
Right. What are some good things to maybe watch out for then in that scenario?
I think one of the things is timing for when you go looking for VC money. So if you make the assumption that a VC is going to want, I think there's, I'm no expert in this, but what people tell me is the standard is, one-time liquidation preferences. Is that if you go too early, you kind of bring that upon yourself, if you like. So the more you can raise money from angels, family offices, secure grants, non-diluting equity, debt, even, debt that you can pay off, to get yourself in the best possible position to take on VC money, then I think that's a consideration. But it might come to a time where there's a certain inevitability of if you are one of the few ideas that's future changing, if you like, then you probably are going to need VC money if you can get it, because they'll only invest in about 1% of all the ideas that get put to them.
Of course, and I assume there are some exceptions as well where, we hear about them where even very early on, going for, like you said, more these bigger ideas in big data, deep tech, and so on, going to VC really is, for the most part, the only option.
Yeah.
Sort of going back to what you were saying before. So I guess there are always exceptions to the rule.
Yes. And my sense about those exceptions are usually that they go with a founder that already has a track record.
Right.
You're in a rather better position as a founder if you're trying to raise and you've had 1 or 2 successful exits already because you know the ropes.
Yeah. Interesting. Anything else that you think is occurring in the startup ecosystem that we should be talking more about?
I think the whole, I mentioned the circus at the beginning of the first program.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was gonna pull on that thread a little bit too. So that's good.
Yeah,
yeah. Explain what you mean by the circus.
Well, I wrote this down as a kind of quote that I'd put in a post a little while back that says, "A circus has been created that incentivizes too many founders supported by too many inexperienced advisors to chase unreal outcomes supported by tax benefits to investors, resulted in too many flaky ideas from ill-prepared people being supported and no one being prepared to call it out."
Okay, that's a truth bomb that we need to pick. I mean, I very much agree with that, and in some ways, I quite often concern myself maybe too much with contributing to it as well.
Yeah,
it's always a worry of mine.
And there are 3 players broadly in this circus. There are the founders themselves, and there are investors, and then there are a whole bunch of different kinds of advisors, and they all have a kind of vested interest in making the circus almost more like a circus rather than kind of saying, there's a nonsense going on here somewhere.
Well, that's exactly, as you know, why I'm known as the no bullshit advisor, because if I think I became quite aware of this circus a few years ago, and I was like, I can't in good faith continue on in this fashion. Like, I was struggling to sleep at night. So so let's dive into that a bit more. Can you pick apart what you said there a little bit more? Explain it more, because I think for people like you and I, that resonates, but maybe for the layman, there's a bit more nuance to it. So what do you mean specifically by that?
If we look at those 3 kind of pots, if you like, founders, investors, advisors, then I'll try and pick apart each one a bit more. So for founders, there's a there's a kind of media hype going on about success. You only hear about successes through the media. You very rarely hear about failures, and you hear about celebrity founders, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Chesky, the Dragon's Den, and all of that kind of stuff. And I think for founders themselves, there's this idea that kind of the corporate world is boring. I don't want to grow a kind of career as a whatever, doctor, solicitor, leader, or whatever. And I think probably with the Lehman's collapse in 2008-9, a whole load of people that were skilled in their corporate world kind of came onto the market and decided that they wanted to found their own businesses, coupled with the kind of rising cost of living. Nobody can afford a house or a mortgage. There's this kind of view that I think many founders see that founding their own business, it's exciting, and they have a
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Passion or an idea, but they might also see this as the only way out. This gives me some self-actualization, some self-expression, some esteem. Otherwise I'm just going to be in the meat grinder for the rest of my time. And then I think there's a kind of Steve Jobs craziness kind of thing that says there's a kind of romance to it, almost a kind of let's all get crazy and and be different and rebellious, and we're almost like the modern day punk movement. Really, it's rather than being punks, we're founders. It's just I'm making kind of analogies that may or may not fit, but I think there is that thing, or a series of things going on, that drive founders to want to do what they want to do. And then there is, on the investment side, the government says, well, if you can raise money from these people, we'll give you at the beginning we'll give them 50% tax relief. So, and a bit later on, we'll give them 30% tax relief. So they're all kind of sucked into getting tax relief. And and then there are organized SEIS and EIS funds, which are marketed on the basis of you getting your tax relief, and every year you should invest in a fund so you get your tax relief. And it's like the tax relief is the tail wagging the dog rather than the brilliance of the idea or the exceptionality of the founder or the whatever. So you kind of almost get you're looking at, or you're being invited to look through the wrong end of the telescope at this thing, if you like. Then I think the fact that there are a lot of angels that are quite gullible, that listen to fantastic stories about what visions and what's possible, and investors, and I include myself in this. We can't be that great if we can keep investing in things of which 80% of them fail. So there's something peculiar going on there,
and some kind of masochism there for sure.
Yeah, there are VCs, that have thrown money into things like WeWork, and Elizabeth Holmes and so on, that swallowed these ideas, about the empires that they were going to build, and they were just in the case of Elizabeth Holmes, they were taken for a ride, and in the case of, say, WeWork, they were persuaded that this was a tech idea rather than a property idea, and it was kind of massively overvalued. And SoftBank, lost a whole load of money, in doing that. So, and then on in the advisor side of things, there is this kind of view that anyone can do it. Anyone can be a kind of startup advisor. That you quite often read posts about, people that just watched a few YouTube videos and then set themselves up as advisors, or created a course, that they're just selling to people, and that there are people that come from a corporate background and think that, having done so well in a corporate background, it can't be difficult to apply those sorts of skills into a startup environment, but they're completely different. In a corporate world, they're all kind of cosseted almost in terms of, they don't run out of money. They can take their time. It's quite leisurely doing strategic planning and whatever, and it goes through a number of iteration cycles. Whereas, founders in a startup are driving by the seat of their pants, and they have to make decisions today. Tomorrow's too late. And then there are all these people that come in with various labels, that are helping, startups, often with no real experience of what the startup world is all about. Whether they're legal, IP, accountants, marketers, storytellers, pitch deck designers, they're the kind of picks and shovels kind of people that are not that interested in what your idea is. But, if I've got experience in graphic design, I can help you put together a pitch deck. But, have I really got those skills? Do I really get what the story is? I can make your deck look pretty. So yeah, we've got. So yeah, I mean, I think there is all there is this circus, and it's feeding itself all the time with these different pressures and drivers.
Yeah. How do we navigate that, and what can we do to improve it? I spend a lot of time thinking about this. There are times where I think, we all have a certain degree of imposter syndrome, I think it's safe to say. And like I mentioned, when you talked about the circus straight away, my immediate thought was, oh no, am I contributing to that? Yeah. I know in my experience and my skill set, and so I'm fairly confident in that. But there are definitely times where I think to myself, am I making it worse by being part of it? Or should I try, or am I making it better in some ways by calling it out and whatever? I definitely have those moments where I think, do you know what, maybe I should just pack it all in and go and get a regular job. Although I know by this point, as a previous founder and current founder and all that, I'd be basically unemployable at this stage. But what can we do? Is there some, and how can we advise people to navigate this crazy circus?
I mean, and my main focus, I think, is on founders. If investors want to make whatever kind of investment decisions they want to make, that's up to them in a sense. They've got their own wisdom, their own experience. Some of them make good calls, some of them make less good calls, and so on. And on the advisor side, there's, there are new ideas coming along, which I suppose are taking a slightly different look at this. Venture studios and so on, that are, you hope are made up of a kind of shrewder team of people, even though the founders sometimes think, I'm not sure I want to give that team of people 50% of my equity to build my business with me. But so approaching it from a founder's perspective, I guess, is where I find most value, I guess. And I try to do what I can do to educate founders that unaware. So I'll give you a small example. Yesterday, somebody posted a post to say they wanted more female founders. They wanted more female investors to invest in their startup. A group of women that had got a business idea and they'd put something on LinkedIn about it. And then they said they were crowdfunding. And then I kind of wrote back a message on their, or comment on their post that says, given that crowdfunding, all the money goes into a nominee account, it really doesn't matter whether you get more female or male investors in it, because it'll all be managed by a nominee account. And if you really want to have influential female founders, female investors invest in you, you've got to find a way for them to bypass the crowdfunding and invest in you directly, so that they can influence you directly by being significant share owners, equity owners, and work as advisors to you rather than come through the crowdfunding route. Now, that's a kind of a bit of advice or an insight that I picked up from, years of working in the field, which I think they may not have appreciated through, the way they'd worded their message on LinkedIn yesterday. But founders are sometimes wary of advisors. Some founders want to, invent the wheel themselves and not take advice from other people. And I think it's a really difficult task or challenge to always be able to find mentors and advisors that give you the right advice. So I just keep bashing away, at putting my stuff out there and, writing a book, and then I might write another book. But it's a bit like you can't save everybody, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, someone needs to be wanting to hear what you have to say, first of all. I tell a lot of people when they ask me what being an advisor entails, I say, basically I get paid to be ignored for a living.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be predominantly what it entails. Ironically, it's when I do I do the 1 hour pro bono sessions that I offer to anyone who wants them, regardless of where the stage they're at, what level they're at, whatever. I don't discriminate in that sense.
Yeah.
It's like everyone gets a free hour, and because of there's very little expectation either way going into that. It kind of frees up that space. No one's paying for it. There's no elephant in the room. It's just, all right, tell me what's going on. Tell me about you. Tell me about the business. I try and cater it as much as possible to that individual, their circumstance, everything like that. And then I just tell them exactly what I think. And it's unfiltered. It is just as it is, right? Hence why I was given the moniker of the no bullshit advisor as a consequence. And that seems to be the really only times where it seems to really sink in. What it is maybe that I'm saying, or sometimes what I'm revealing, quite often more than anything, is revealing a truth that's kind of usually right in front of people. But it's hard to see the forest for the trees sometimes. And that's quite revealing to me. I find that, but it sometimes takes that approach to take all potential alternative motivations off the table. So it just becomes a very honest, open conversation. There's no, you know what I mean? There's no ulterior motives there. It's just, I'm here to help you. You've got a problem. Tell me what it is. Let's go, kind of thing. And I find that very interesting. That sort of raw format. But well, that's a really interesting explanation, though. I mean, of the circus as a whole. And I'm looking at it more from the founder perspective too. It's a minefield, and I feel very sorry sometimes for founders coming into all of this for the first time. Excuse me, that was a poorly timed sneeze. Forgive me. And another. So yeah, I do feel very sorry sometimes for, like I was saying, for those first time founders coming into all this for the first time and being in some ways naive to all of this, but at the same time, it's also ignorance is bliss, right? I'm also very jealous sometimes of those founders just thinking, oh, I wish I was where you were, before jumping into it. Do you think there's another element to this as well, though, which is we have to be cautious? Because I'm also very wary of when we talk about the pitfalls of the startup world and the circus, as you coined it, that we're also potentially running the risk of putting people off entering into this world, too, about, because of the struggles. So, to an extent, ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah.
Some of the most successful founders I've seen have been completely unaware of this stuff, and they just go head first and barge into it. And that works too, right? Is there a responsibility there for us?
I think it's the case that there are people that get funded that shouldn't be, and there are people that don't get funded that should. And who can play God and decide who these people are? The kind of market decides, who they are. But and I wouldn't want to put people off with with a good idea. I'd want them to know, broadly what the risks are. But I think I'd also want them to know that, and this is like, what I didn't cover in Angel Think, but I've subsequently kind of developed, thoughts about, and I just kind of got some ideas on my phone here that, some of this is in Angel Think, but, some of them is kind of newer thinking that investors want to, not all of them, but most investors, when they're looking for deal flow, are looking for something that is that excites them, that's going to get their pulses racing a bit more. And being able to tell people what that idea is, your story and how you lay that
It's
out.
like the dinner table test. Will they sit around the dinner table and talk about it with their friends? That kind of thing. Yeah.
And that's a good way of coining it. To be able to say, I've met a founder that's got this great idea, or better still, I've just invested in a founder that's got this great idea. Because angels like, I suppose, bragging rights. To be able to say, well, I was one of the first people into Airbnb or whatever. Or so I think if I go back to Clayton Christensen and the kind of disruptive innovation idea, that you probably are looking for certain kind of archetypes, if you like, of idea that is going to be future shaping in some way, and can you categorize those kind of ideas? And this is something I'm working on at the moment, that might go into a new book, new idea. But so Clayton Christensen 25 years or so ago talked about disruptive innovations and gave some examples.
Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt the episode, but really quick announcement to make. If you're a startup founder, you'll definitely want to hear this. So I want to quickly shout out our sponsor for today's episode, Founder Catalyst. Founder Catalyst have been nailing it with their SCIS and EIS advanced assurance applications, boasting a perfect 100% success rate record over the last 3 years. And if you're using their funding round service, they include that for you as standard. Speaking of their funding round service, it's incredibly cost effective. It's a fixed fee of £1,495 plus VAT. They handle all your funding round legals, regardless of how much you're raising. No monthly fees, no hidden extras. One of their customers recently raised 2.7 million and saved around £10,000 compared to the next best options. Founder Catalyst is run by founders who've been through it all, so they truly understand what you need, and we're really proud to have them sponsor this episode. So if you're looking to streamline your fundraising process and save quite a bit of cash, check out Founder Catalyst in the link in the description, where also you, as a Founders Unplugged viewer, will be privy to 10% off that fee that we talked about. So make sure you use that link in the description to get that applied. Thanks very much. Back to the episode.
Of those, and I tend to think, kind of more modern day examples might just simply be the German supermarkets, the Aldis and Lidls that came along and started with cheap non-branded stuff in a shed, and over time they've got over 10% of the market, and middle class people are saying, well, we have to shop at Aldi or Lidl, and people like Tesco's, who were dominant 20 odd years ago, are no longer as dominant as they were. And then we've had things like blue ocean strategies. Probably more recently, the idea of trying to find inflection points in the world. Where you spot a kind of sea change of something that's happening that investors might be interested in, like the rise of e-commerce, or the shift to remote work, or the growing focus on sustainability. These are kind of sea changes and generative AI, that people will invest in because they want to be first, and the herd might follow, but they want to be the first in there. Platform technologies, moonshot ideas, like Musk and SpaceX, and wanting to colonize Mars and so on. People will throw money at it. Social impact ideas, like renewable energy technologies, network effects, ecosystems, data. I mean, data is becoming really quite interesting. I think I've got a colleague that's trying to build a data. There's a business that will be built on being able to share data. So I think as a founder, you can come along with your own idea. I'm not saying you can't. And too often founders come along having not read the market well enough with and they come along with a kind of Me Too copy idea that sort of says, I want to build an app that improves people's mental health and well-being. And you think, well, go to the App Store, there's 101 of them out there already. What's different about this one? And they'll go around trying to secure people's investment in another faster pizza delivery idea or a dog walking app or whatever, and it's all been done before, or it's a first world problem, or they've got the timing wrong, or whatever, or they can look for something that's going to shape the future in some way. So I guess trying to make founders aware of, what investors are looking for, what they're going to think, how they're going to get some competitive advantage over, other ideas through, and I'd say, don't say it's disruptive or game changing if it isn't, because that's the kind of worst thing that you can do. That's the kind of almost biggest red flag that you can.
Well, I suppose you're inviting that scrutiny, then, aren't you? If you're saying if you're making that claim, then you then need to back up that claim.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself in that firing line, I suppose. But I mean, I suppose, just to play devil's advocate a little bit on what you said, of which, and by the way, it's worth noting that the few verticals you mentioned there make me feel very good, because of actually there's a few that my startup falls into, and we're going for a race soon. So that's made me feel good. But just to play devil's advocate slightly on what you said there too. I mean, I suppose on both ends of that spectrum, we've seen some challenges to that, in the sense of it's not always necessarily a bad idea if you can improve on an existing solution to go into a crowded market. Right, I suppose. But I suppose that's the key, is you need to be improving upon that. But then also on the other end, jumping on the bandwagon of something. I mean, AI is a great example of that, of what is in vogue, what investors are interested in, let's say. It can also be problematic because of, as we see, almost every business now is an AI business. So there's a fatigue that comes with that too, or, at the very least, you need to create a very ironclad sense of defensibility around your products, in AI, which I think we're maybe seeing the tail end of the interest in AI now. I don't know, are we? It's, at least I am. I'm quite bold of it, isn't it?
In short, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Is it not something that you typically invest in, AI?
There are one or two businesses that are using AI as, I guess, to enhance their core business.
Right. But it isn't the whole business.
Yeah. And I suppose if I think back, in the healthcare field, for example, and this is not new, but, people have used large language models to improve diagnostic capability, for example. And, it's thinking Babylon, for example, and it's made some improvements to healthcare, delivery of healthcare, and so on. I work with somebody that applied for an Innovate UK grant year before last, that was using AI not only to develop diagnostic capability, but was also using it to develop improving diagnostic capability in ethnic communities where their first language wasn't English, so that they were describing symptoms in a different language, that they were using AI to kind of translate that into what an English speaking doctor might understand, as well as coming up with treatment suggestions. So there are niches that where I think it's interesting. I think what I read, for example, is that it's a bit of a gold rush, or has been, and there will be casualties.
There already have been.
And there have been, in much the same way that we've seen them with blockchain, crypto, Web3, whatever. It's
Yeah, for sure. Would it be fair to say then that medtech, given your background, is your sort of primary area of interest?
sorry. Would it be fair to say that it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I spent 33 years in the NHS, so I know a bit about it, I guess, and
I would hope so after that amount of time.
I ended up being a director of a trust. So,
Right.
and I spent some time in commissioning services, and at the beginning, both being a practitioner and then being a teacher, and then got into management. So, but it's a very broad field that I in no way feel an expert across all of it. So, but yes, it is an area of interest. It's also an area where there are lots of people, I suppose, trying to find solutions for problems that are a bit intractable almost. So, take mental health, for example. There are statistics that say, 1 in 6 people will have a mental health problem at some time in their life, or 1 in 4 people, or 1 in 6 people have got a mental health problem now. And the idea that you can resolve people's mental health problem by reading some online guidance is tenuous, I suppose. You'd have to be able to show a bit more evidence that it works than just pitching the idea out there.
Of course, yeah.
But there are some people with some success. Kind of brings us back to what marketing is all about, really, which is trying to sell people a solution that they feel good about. So
yeah.
But there are other. I mean, there is a company that I'm working with, and I think this is a problem area that obviously needs some attention, which is the increasing amount of obesity in the world and the side effects of obesity in terms of diabetes, heart disease, even cancers, and so on. The world is becoming too, I suppose, westernized in its diet, or even Americanized. And if governments are going to pay for some of these solutions, to try to solve major public health problems, there's a fairly decent investment case there. If you're reliant on a B2C model to try to sell a lot of health benefit type solutions to people, I think the idea is much more risky.
Do you think that that there's much value in a health tech, medtech business in the UK that's primary goal is to be selling to the NHS? Or do you think that inherently puts the whole prospect at a significant amount of risk, given the way that buying and bidding process works in the UK?
Yeah, I think selling solutions to the NHS is fraught with problems, in part because the NHS is strapped for cash and it has its own set of priorities. So if you came up with a drug that was the cure for cancer, I'm being a bit flippant, but okay, you came up with something that rapidly improved early cancer diagnosis, for example. Cancer is a NHS priority. Then you've got some hope, I guess, of
there's some alignment there with their overall goals, right?
The same with heart disease. Or on the other hand, if you came up with something that was improving allergy sensitivity, which is not a national priority for the NHS, or allergy treatment or allergy management, then trying to sell some things to the NHS are going to be far more difficult than others because of their priorities, because of nice recommendations, because of what they've got the money for, year on year. I think with the arrival of a new government, a Labour government, they've made noises about, they want to reduce waiting lists, and they'll probably be making more work available to the private sector, more elective work to the private sector. Then I think, companies that are in the private sector delivering elective treatments, operations to, for NHS patients could well be an area that you might consider investing in. There is always the question about exit too, there isn't there? So that anything that looks like a temporary need, if you are not convinced it will continue to scale.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
Over time, it's just solving a temporary problem, then it becomes a bit more questionable.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I suppose equally, if you solve the problem too well, you do yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
Well, and the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which we touched on quite a lot throughout the conversation, obviously we're both advisors as part of what the various things that we both do. What would you say to a founder are some key attributes that should be looked out for in an advisor? We've talked a lot about founders, investors, and so on, but what about what can you speak on in terms of that?
I think one of the key things is that they really believe in what you're trying to do.
Right.
So that's. I mean, there are exceptions, obviously. I mean, you can go and get an accountant or a lawyer or a solicitor or whatever, or an IP advisor. You're just buying a service, and they don't necessarily have to believe in what you're trying to do. But if you want somebody, well, I suppose I distinguish between advisors and consultants in that sense. My preference as an advisor or as a mentor is that I develop a long-term relationship with somebody, and I'll still be there 3, 4, 5 years down the line, helping them scale, grow, moving towards exit. You go and talk to a consultant, they spend 3 months or so with you, and they give you a solution, they give you a fee, and they walk away. So I'm talking about these the people that you might be looking for as your Sherpa, almost your kind of guide in life, nearly. It's kind
right.
of, yeah. So those people have to buy into you. They have to believe in what you're doing, be willing to stand by you, and be willing to, you mentioned the dinner table conversation. I try to think about the founders that I'll talk to my wife about, or talk to my, my sisters about, or talk to other friends about. Who have I met that I really love, almost, that I really want to see succeed. And it's a challenge. I mean, and I suppose you're on that kind of cusp almost of you want to give these people objective advice, objective help, help them succeed, hold them to account, and the cusp is between that and friendship. So to stay objective, sometimes you have to tell them the tough stuff.
Sometimes you can't say what they want to hear, but what they need to hear.
Yeah.
So a founder should really be looking for someone that is at this level, when we're talking, I guess, more a strategic founder / mentor, as you described them, less of a consultant. Ideally, looking for someone that is passionate, actually gives a crap. Basically, is that in essence what you're saying?
Yeah.
What else maybe should be some of the key attributes? I mean, you mentioned before about the circus aspects of it. There's a lot of individuals out there that claim to have the experience, or maybe they have the wrong experience. What are some key indicators then for a founder to be able to derive the right conclusions based on someone's apparent experience and so on, aside from the obvious, looking at someone's CV, LinkedIn, whatever? Are there some key things that a founder should be looking out for to make sure that there's alignment there as well?
I think sometimes sector experience is important, and then I say that, and then I think sometimes it's overrated, because I've come across people that don't want to work with me because I don't have deep sector experience in what they're trying to do. I don't pretend to understand the ins and outs of blockchain, for example.
Right.
Never particularly interested me. So, a founder I spoke to a couple of years ago said, would you be willing to help or work with me? And I'm looking for somebody that understands this. But what I am looking to help people with is, I suppose I call it inner work, people that are willing to develop some of the skills and attributes that they need to be an exceptional founder, to grow, to scale, to execute, whatever. So, whether I understand blockchain or not, if I can't persuade somebody to choose the right metrics and use an OKR approach, or have some disciplines, or some even have fairly regular meetings with me to discuss what they've achieved with the things that they committed to last time, and what they're going to work on for next time. I'd say I think a key problem, or a key question probably for a founder, is to say, if you want somebody to work with you as an advisor, is to say to the advisor, what do you want out of this relationship? It's a two-way thing we're embarking on here, isn't it? So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I agree with you with that sort of, there's an area of conflict I also get when it comes to sort of sector experience too. I broadly think, especially for the things that I predominantly focus on, that there are some approaches that just, whether it's mentoring the founder themselves to make them to improve on those certain skills, that's universal. That doesn't really matter in what sector you're in. And then other things in relation to sales and marketing and sort of commercial strategy overall, which apply across the board. But then there are definitely areas where I would say, that's not my ever expertise. It doesn't happen as much. It's more, those things tend to be quite universal. But yeah, good advice, I think, as well for founders to try and understand what the motivations are for the other side. What do you want to get out of this? That's a really good point, and one that I'll probably steal that from you as advice that I give out now, because I hadn't really. I hadn't really, sort of thought of advising it that to be a question in those early stages of negotiation, or trying to feel each other out and so on. So, yeah, good advice overall. So, look, when is this next book coming together? When are we going to potentially be seeing that on the shelves?
I'm not absolutely committed to it, and
Okay.
my learnings from the first book are that I went down a self-publishing route. And I should have put more effort into trying to find a publisher, or an agent that would have found me a publisher. So I'm thinking that I might do that this time, try and find a publisher or an agent. And, that will take rather longer than if I go down a self-publishing route. What I discovered from talking to one agent a while back is that there's a perversity here, that if you've self-published once and you weren't an international bestseller, then finding an agent or a publisher to take on your next book is that much harder, because they will make judgments about how well your first book did. So
Right.
So that may work against me. But if I find that for a fact, from talking to publishers or agents, then I'll look at self-publishing again. Or if I find the right person that wants to work with me, I could turn it into a course and be one of those cursed people that
Oh no, not another course, Phil. That's the last.
that puts a course out there. So who knows?
Yeah, I'll never say never, I suppose. But
Yeah.
it's interesting. You basically described the traction problem, right? With the publishing, it's like it's better to have, better not to mention any traction if it's not amazing traction, right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we've come to the end of our conversation. So, look, Phil, I really appreciate you jumping on. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And, you've got a wealth of knowledge that I feel like, to be honest, even in this conversation, we've only just started to tap away on. So we should absolutely do this again in future if you'd be up for it, for round 2, let's say. But yeah, anything you wanted to, any parting words you wanted to leave myself and the audience
well,
with?
no, it's been an absolute pleasure for me to spend some time with you, to chew the fat over a whole range of things, problems, challenges, issues, opportunities, and so on. I really do think that there are people out there, that founders, that have great ideas and are deserving of getting them developed, and becoming future changing. They are obviously not the majority, but that's just how it is. Going back to my marathon analogy, not everybody can be a winner. So yeah, I mean, and in the future, if I do come up with this other project, or and I'm getting there with it, then I'd love the opportunity to tell you about how that's gone, and
I'd love to hear it. Yeah,
being able to share some kind of newer insights with what I've come up with since then. And then I kind of think, well, maybe I ought to write Angel Think Edition 2 or something.
yeah. Angel Think 2 returns. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, I look forward to that day. Absolutely. Keep me posted. We'll keep in touch anyway. And in the meantime, where should we send people to check you out? Because I'll be putting those links. But should I put your LinkedIn there?
Yeah, no, my LinkedIn profile is the place, really.
Wonderful.
I tend not to do anything else. I don't have the time.
Yeah, I know the feeling for sure. All right, wonderful. Well, we'll put that in the link in the description so people can go check you out, follow you, and buy your book. So yeah, thank you again, Phil. Have a wonderful day, and hope to catch up again very soon.
Cheers, Greg.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe, or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.